Hey everyone, it's Alex, and I am here with the nominations announcement for the 70th Annual BAFTA Awards. Now, the BAFTA Awards are basically the British equivalent of the Oscars. They're the only major award show in the award season cycle that is not held in the United States. It's held in London, but it's considered a very important award show because, like the Golden Globes and the Screen Actors Guild Awards and the Critics' Choice Awards, the winners at the BAFTA Awards can serve as a good indicator of what might win at the Oscars. Now, just because the BAFTAs are like the Oscars doesn't mean that they do everything like the Oscars. The BAFTAs have some categories that the Oscars don't. Since the BAFTAs are a British award show, for instance, they have a category called Outstanding British Film. And they also have a category called Outstanding Debut by a British Writer, Director, or Producer. They only have one sound category instead of two, like the Oscars, and while they have a Best Original Score category, they do not have a Best Original Song category, which is what the Oscars, the Golden Globes, and the Critics' Choice all have. Also, unlike the Oscars, the BAFTAs have 5 nominations for makeup and hairstyling instead of just 3. But, unfortunately, while the Oscars allow as many as 10 films to be nominated for Best Picture, the BAFTAs stick with only just 5. And also the BAFTAs have what is called a Rising Star Award, and what's unique about this award is that it is the only award in the BAFTAs where the winner is chosen not by BAFTA voters, but by online polling from the general public. Those are just a few of the main differences, but otherwise the whole concept of the show is pretty much the same, and the show will have a lot of the same nominees and winners that the Oscars do. The Oscar nominations will be coming out Tuesday, January 24th, which is why I'm getting this video up now, since the BAFTAs always happen before the Oscars. And the 70th BAFTA Awards will be taking place on Sunday, February 12th, and will be hosted by Stephen Fry, who is a very popular comedian in Britain, and it will be broadcast in the US, I think, on BBC America, I believe. So if you have BBC America and you want to watch the BAFTAs, that's where you watch them. I unfortunately do not have BBC America on my TiVo, so I sadly will not be able to watch it, although I'm sure there will be clips that the BAFTAs will put on their YouTube channel that I can watch. But anyway, it's time to get to the real reason for this video, the actual BAFTA nominations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of the nominations one by one, just read through them all without commenting on what I like or don't like, and then when I'm done with all of that, I'm going to go through and break down the nominations and talk about what I like and what I don't like, and if I feel something important got snubbed. So here we go. The nominations for the 70th Annual BAFTA Awards. Best Art Direction. Doctor Strange. Production design by Charles Wood. Set decoration by John Bush. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Production design by Stuart Craig. Set decoration by Anna Pinnock. Hail Caesar. Production design by Jess Goncher. Set decoration by Nancy Hay. La La Land. Production design by David Wasco. Set decoration by Sandy Reynolds Wasco. Nocturnal Animals. Production design by Shane Valentino. Set decoration by Meg Everest. Best Cinematography. Bradford Young, Arrival. Giles Nutjens, Hell or High Water. Linus Sandgren, La La Land. Greg Fraser, Lion. Seamus McGarvey, Nocturnal Animals. Best Costume Design. Joanna Johnston, Allied. Colleen Atwood, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Consolata Boyle, Florence Foster Jenkins. Madeline Fontaine, Jackie. Mary Zofries, La La Land. Best Editing. Joe Walker, Arrival. John Gilbert, Hacksaw Ridge. Tom Cross, La La Land. Jennifer Lame, Manchester by the Sea. Joan Sobel, Nocturnal Animals. Best Makeup and Hair. Jeremy Woodhead, Doctor Strange. J. Roy Helland and Daniel Phillips, Florence Foster Jenkins. Shane Thomas, Hacksaw Ridge. Donald Mowat and Yolanda Tousing, Nocturnal Animals. Amanda Knight, Neil Scanlon, and Lisa Tomlin, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. Best Score: Johan Johansson, Arrival. Micah Levi, Jackie. Justin Hurwitz, La La Land. Dustin O'Halloran and Hauschka, Lion. Abel Korzeniowski, Nocturnal Animals. Best Sound: Claude LaHaye, Bernard Garipe-Strobel, and Sylvain Belmer, Arrival. Mike Crestwood-Smith, Dror Mahar, Wiley Stateman, and David Wyman, Deepwater Horizon. Niv Adiri, Glenn Fremantle, Simon Hayes, Andy Nelson, and Ian Tapp, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Peter Grace, Robert McKenzie, Kevin O'Connell, and Andy Wright, Hacksaw Ridge. Mildred Iatru Morgan, Ai Ling Lee, Steve A. Morrow, and Andy Nelson, La La Land. Best Visual Effects: Louis Morin, Arrival. Richard Bluff, Stefan Soretti, Paul Corbold, and Jonathan Faulkner, Doctor Strange. Tim Burke, Pablo Grillo, Christian Mance, and David Watkins, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Robert Legato, Dan Lemon, Andrew R. Jones, and Adam Valdez, The Jungle Book. Neil Corbold, Hal Hickel, Mohen Leo, John Knoll, and Nigel Sumner, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. Best Animated Short Film: The Allen Dimension. Jack Clinch, Jonathan Harbottle, and Millie Marsh. A Love Story. Khaled Gad, Anushka Kashani, Nanaya Kara, and Elena Ruscombe King. Tough, Jennifer Zheng. Best Live Action Short Film: Consumed, Richard John Seymour. Home, Shpat Data, Afolabi Kuti, Daniel Malloy, and Scott O'Donnell. Mouth of Hell, Bart Gavigan, Samir Mahanovich, Ali Smith, and Michael Wilson. The Party, Farah Abushwaisha, Emmett Fleming, Andrea Harkin, and Connor McNeil. Standby, Charlotte Regan and Jack Hannon. Best Documentary Film: The Beatles, 8 Days a Week, The Touring Years, Ron Howard. The Eagle Huntress, Otto Bell and Stacey Rice. Notes on Blindness, Peter Middleton and James Spinney. 13th, Ava DuVernay. Wiener, Josh Kriegman and Elise Steinberg. Best Foreign Language Film: Dipon from France, directed by Jacques Audiard. Julieta from Spain, directed by Pedro Almodovar. Mustang from France, directed by Denise Gamze Ergeben. Son of Saul from Hungary, directed by Laszlo Nemes. Tony Erdmann from Germany, directed by Maren Ade. Best Animated Feature: Finding Dory, Andrew Stanton. Kubo and the Two Strings, Travis Knight. Moana, Ron Clements and John Musker. Zootopia, Byron Howard and Rich Moore. Outstanding British Film: American Honey, Denial, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, I, Daniel Blake, Notes on Blindness, Under the Shadow. Outstanding Debut by a British writer, director, or producer: The Girl with All the Gifts, Mike Carey and Camille Gayton. The Hard Stop, George Amponsa and Dion Walker. Notes on Blindness, Peter Middleton, James Spinney, and Jojo Ellison. The Pass, John Donnelly and Ben Williams. Under the Shadow, Babak Anvari, Emily Leo, Oliver Roskill, and Lunken Toe. Best Original Screenplay: Taylor Sheridan, Hell or High Water. Paul Laverty, I, Daniel Blake. Damien Chazelle, La La Land. Kenneth Lonergan, Manchester by the Sea. Barry Jenkins, Moonlight. Best Adapted Screenplay: Eric Heiserer, Arrival. based on the short story Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang. Robert Schenken and Andrew Knight, Hacksaw Ridge, based on true events. Theodore Melfi and Allison Schroeder, Hidden Figures, based on the book by Margot Lee Shetterly. Luke Davies, Lion, based on the book A Long Way Home by Saru Brierley. Tom Ford, Nocturnal Animals, based on the novel Tony and Susan by Austin Wright. Now, in Hacksaw Ridge's case here, just want to make a side note. Even though it is listed as adapted screenplay, I couldn't find anything on IMDb or anywhere else listing a specific source material it's based on. So for that reason, I don't know why it's here in adapted screenplay instead of original, because for adapted, usually there's a specific source listed on IMDb, but I guess the BAFTA rules are different than the Oscar rules. But we'll see if it gets nominated there at the Oscars as well. Who knows? Moving on. The Rising Star Award. Leia Costa, Lucas Hedges, Tom Holland, Ruth Negga, Anya Taylor-Joy. Best Supporting Actor. Mahershala Ali, Moonlight. Jeff Bridges, Hell or High Water. Hugh Grant, Florence Foster Jenkins. Dev Patel, Lion. Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Nocturnal Animals. Best Supporting Actress. Viola Davis, Fences. Naomi Harris, Moonlight. Nicole Kidman, Lion. Haley Squires, I, Daniel Blake. Michelle Williams, Manchester by the Sea. Best Actor. Casey Affleck, Manchester by the Sea. Andrew Garfield, Hacksaw Ridge. Ryan Gosling, La La Land. Jake Gyllenhaal, Nocturnal Animals. Viggo Mortensen, Captain Fantastic. Best Actress. Amy Adams, Arrival. Emily Blunt, The Girl on the Train. Natalie Portman, Jackie. Emma Stone, La La Land. Meryl Streep, Florence Foster Jenkins. Best Director. Denis Villeneuve, Arrival. Ken Loach, I, Daniel Blake. Damien Chazelle, La La Land. Kenneth Lonergan, Manchester by the Sea. Tom Ford, Nocturnal Animals. And finally, Best Picture. Arrival. Dan Levine, Sean Levy, David Lind, and Aaron Ryder, producers. I, Daniel Blake. Rebecca O'Brien, producer. La La Land. Fred Berger, Jordan Horowitz, and Mark Platt, producers. Manchester by the Sea. Lauren Beck, Matt Damon, Chris Moore, Kimberly Stewart, and Kevin J. Walsh, producers. Moonlight. Dee Dee Gardner, Jeremy Kleiner, and Adele Romansky, producers. And those are the nominations for the 70th Annual BAFTA Awards. Now let's see what I actually think of the nominees. For Best Art Direction, haven't seen Doctor Strange. The sets looked interesting in the trailer, but I wasn't sure how many of those sets were actually real and how many of them were just CGI and filmed in front of a green screen. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. That had some very great looking sets, not only recreating New York City in the 1920s, but recreating it as if it were a land inhabited by wizards, and that looked really great. Hail Caesar, that's a bit of a surprise. I wasn't sure how well it would do at any award show because it came out so early in 2016, and usually that's not always a good time to release movies for awards consideration. But because it is a Coen Brothers film, that's probably why it was remembered here. But that film had some fantastic looking sets, really recreating the feel of 1950s Hollywood, and especially seeing all the different sets that they had to create for the films being filmed in the movie studio. That's the focus of the film. La La Land definitely deserves to be on here. It's very rare to see a film set in contemporary times nominated in a category like this, but in La La Land's case, since it also kind of creates a fantasy element in some ways with the musical numbers, I can see why it's nominated here, and deservedly so. Nocturnal Animals is a big head scratcher for me because I can sort of see why they might be drawn to nominated here, because Amy Adams' character lives in a really stylish home and things like that. And there are like restaurants and the museum where she works that look very fancy, but they don't really stand out enough, in my opinion, to warrant an awards nomination of any kind. Rather, I'd like to see films where a lot of attention had to be paid to meticulous detail, particularly historical detail, reflected here. Films like Jackie, for instance, would have been more worthy to be nominated here, in my opinion. Or Silence, which I haven't seen yet, but I'm going to, but just based on the trailers and images alone, having to recreate the look and feel of 17th century Japan, and the fact that it's directed by Martin Scorsese, who's been wanting to make Silence for 25 years, I would think that would be enough to warrant a nomination. But maybe BAFTA voters didn't see Silence. Silence does not show up anywhere here at all, which is stunning. For like the Golden Globes and the Critics' Choice and the Screen Actors Guild Awards, it was understandable that Silence didn't really show up there because it had only just begun screening for critics, but I'm surprised that it's not nominated here for anything, because I would have thought they would have sent out at least screener DVDs to BAFTA voters to have them nominate it, but I guess maybe not enough of them saw it. However, the BAFTA nominations came out right around the time that the Oscar voting was still going on, and Oscar voters, I know, were sent screeners of Silence, so maybe, hopefully, enough of them saw it and will nominate it, but we'll see on Tuesday the 24th. Other films that I would have liked to have seen nominated here are Love and Friendship, which is an English period film with very, very beautiful, lavish sets, certainly more worthy than Nocturnal Animals. Florence Foster Jenkins would have been a wonderful nominee here. Again, lavish sets, but made to recreate a certain time period, specifically the 1940s in New York City. Even films like Rogue One, a Star Wars story, would have been more worthy than Nocturnal Animals, because while it's a science fiction film, good science fiction films often do show up in categories like this. Films like Inception, Gravity, Interstellar, I'm not sure about their BAFTA history, but all of those got Oscar nominations for Best Art Direction. And maybe Rogue One will get an Oscar nomination for that too. I don't know, but we'll see. But all of those films that I mentioned, I feel would be more worthy than Nocturnal Animals. And while Nocturnal Animals, as I said before, had some lavish sets that looked nice, in particular for Amy Adams' scenes, they weren't really enough to stand out to warrant a nomination. For Best Cinematography, Arrival absolutely deserves to be on here. Beautiful images in that film, especially the shots of the alien spaceship hovering in the air with fog rolling across the land. Just gorgeous, gorgeous. Hell or High Water, I'm so glad to see in here. That film hasn't really gotten too many cinematography nominations, but it absolutely deserves it. Just beautiful shots of the Texas landscape. La La Land absolutely deserves to be on here. Just gorgeous use of color. It's really a feast for your eyes, especially in the musical numbers. Lion had some very beautiful scenery too. Nocturnal Animals, the cinematography was fine, but nothing in it was eye-popping enough to stand out, similar to Best Art Direction. Jackie, I think, would have been a better contender here from the way it has to capture all the emotions on Natalie Portman's face in very big close-up shots. And also there are some scenes in Jackie where you wonder, how did they pull off a shot like that? Namely the scene where John F. Kennedy has just been shot and Jackie is clinging to him desperately as blood and literally his brains are pouring out all over her, and the car is speeding on the road as they're trying to get to the hospital. That shot alone, I was like wondering, how did they pull that off? Moonlight also had some very gorgeous cinematography, particularly in the way it distinguished itself between the three acts of the film, in which each act is shot with different shades of various colors. For that reason alone, it should have been nominated here. Silence, from the photos I've seen, just look absolutely beautiful, so I'm surprised for that reason it's not in here. Even Rogue One, I think, would have been more worthy of a nomination here, because they had some very gorgeous images from locations that they shot the film in, such as Iceland and the Maldives. Now, if you're assuming based on this that I hated Nocturnal Animals, I actually did not. I did like the film very much. However, nothing about it really stood out to me among the absolute best things of the year. Not its acting, not its writing, not its directing, not its cinematography or art direction or editing or anything else. It was good, but not great. Best costume design, this looks like a very solid list. I did not see Allied. That film was pretty much dead on arrival due to how badly it bombed at the box office, but the costumes, at least in the trailers, looked really great. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, absolutely. Florence Foster Jenkins, absolutely. Jackie, La La Land, absolutely. Love and Friendship, I wish could have made the cut here. Same with, from what I've seen in the trailers, Silence, but I can't complain about this category. Very decent overall. For Best Editing, Arrival, absolutely. Hacksaw Ridge, okay. La La Land, yes. Manchester by the Sea, yes. Nocturnal Animals, it's alright, but I felt movies like Hell or High Water or Moonlight were more worthy of this nomination because they had to really put together a unique story, and the way to do that unique story was to have great editing, and those films certainly had it. For Best Makeup and Hair, can't comment on Doctor Strange. Florence Foster Jenkins, yes. Hacksaw Ridge, yes. Nocturnal Animals, really? Was it for Aaron Taylor Johnson having to look, and Michael Shannon looking all scruffy? Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, alright. Although I'm surprised that some of the Oscar contenders like Deadpool and Star Trek Beyond and Suicide Squad don't show up in here, because usually makeup artists who have to do a lot of prosthetic work on actors are usually automatically rewarded with nominations here, and I know many people probably feel that those films deserve a nomination for their makeup. For Best Score, very happy to see Arrival on here. It was ruled ineligible at the Oscars because I think it used some of the score from Shutter Island, so therefore it did not have enough of an original score to be eligible there, but I guess that doesn't matter for the BAFTAs. And I'm very glad it's here because Arrival's score was so beautiful and haunting and otherworldly, just matched the whole tone of the movie of aliens coming to Earth, and just absolutely haunting if you listen to it. Jackie, yes, absolutely. Very beautiful score. La La Land, of course. If La La Land was not in here, I'd be stunned. Lion, very good. And then Nocturnal Animals. Really? The music was okay in Nocturnal Animals, but I don't remember anything about it at all. Films like Florence Foster Jenkins, The Light Between Oceans, Zootopia, Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, Moana, Kubo and the Two Strings, Hell or High Water, Manchester by the Sea, Moonlight, all of those scores were much more memorable than Nocturnal Animals. In fact, actually, Moonlight should have been the one to fill up this fifth spot here. The fact that it's not nominated here is just staggering. Now, I'm glad Moonlight did get nominated in some of the big categories, but I'm honestly stunned that Moonlight underperformed in all the technical categories. I don't know what it is about Nocturnal Animals that's really whetted the BAFTA's appetite so much. Nocturnal Animals has done very well at award shows where the voting body is largely foreign. The Golden Globes and the BAFTAs are the two big examples here. It's done very well at both those award shows. But at the Critics' Choice Awards, it only got a few technical nominations, and I believe Best Adapted Screenplay. And at the Screen Actors Guild Awards, it only got a nomination for Best Stunt Ensemble. In those award shows, the voting body is overwhelmingly American. I guess there must be things in this film that are more appealing to foreign voters than American voters, because Nocturnal Animals really, really overperformed to, I think, many people's expectations here. And in the case of Moonlight, its score should have been in here over Nocturnal Animals because the way they blended piano and synthesizer was so haunting that it just made the scenes in which they were used all the more powerful and dramatic and effective. Like really, really played with your heartstrings. For Best Sound, all of these contenders are great. Uh, Although I kind of wish they would split it into two categories like the Oscars. That way you could allow more films that had great sound editing and sound mixing like The Jungle Book, Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, or Sully to compete. But otherwise, no complaints here. For Best Visual Effects, these 5 films are actually the exact 5 films I'm predicting will get nominated at the Oscars. And from everything I've seen, either the movies themselves or the trailers, I have no objections. Arrival definitely deserves to be on here. Very realistic in terms of their effects, which is what I like and what most award shows like. Doctor Strange, you always got to put at least one superhero film here, and I can see why it's the choice here just from the trailers alone. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, definitely. The Jungle Book, absolutely. If The Jungle Book were not nominated here, that would be one of the most staggering snubs I've ever seen. But it deserves to be nominated here, and it will probably win, and I hope it does. And Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, of course. It's a Star Wars film, and they always get nominated, but they deserve to. Yeah, I have no complaints about films that I feel were snubbed here. Best Animated Short Film, haven't seen any of these. Best Live Action Short Film, haven't seen any of these. None of them were among the eligible contenders for the Oscars, so I don't know if Oscar voters and BAFTA voters get sent the same group of short films to consider. Maybe some of these short films were in the initial Oscar voting stage before they narrowed it down to 10 semifinalists, but we'll never know. For Best Documentary Film, I haven't seen any of these, but I've heard a lot about them. I've heard Ron Howard's documentary, The Beatles 8 Days a Week, The Touring Years, is excellent. You know, provides a fascinating look at the Beatles and their tour of the United States when Beatlemania hit the United States and the craziness that ensued with like fans chasing after them and all that. The Eagle Huntress, that's been popping up everywhere. That's the film narrated by Daisy Ridley about a young girl from Mongolia who tries to become the first female hunter in her family in many, many generations. Notes on Blindness, I've heard some things about I think a musician who goes blind or something. 13th, that's gotten a lot of buzz, and that will probably be nominated at the Oscars. It's Ava DuVernay's documentary about the history of how racism has led to mass incarceration of African Americans within our prison system, and how that all stemmed from the passage of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. Weiner, that'll probably also get nominated at the Oscars. It's about Anthony Weiner's failed campaign for mayor of New York City, in which more lewd photos of him were discovered. Because before he had run for mayor of New York City, he was forced to resign from Congress after he tweeted out lewd photos. For Best Foreign Language Film, this is interesting because 2 of the nominees here were nominated at the Oscars last year, Mustang and Son of Saul, but those films had not been released in the UK by the time the Oscars happened last year. So because of that, that's why they're nominated this year. And I saw Son of Saul before the Oscars last year, and that was a very powerful film, and it totally deserved to win Best Foreign Language Film last year, in my opinion. Deepan, I've heard a lot of great things about, got a lot of acclaim at the Cannes Film Festival. Julieta, I've heard a lot of great things about, and Pedro Almodovar is probably Spain's most famous director. And Tony Erdmann, that's been getting a lot of buzz in various film critic circles, and it's actually considered the front runner right now for the Oscars. Of course, we don't know yet if it will be nominated, but many people are expecting that it will, and many people think that it will win the Oscar. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at the BAFTAs, if they'll go with, say, Son of Saul because it won at the Oscars last year, or if they'll go with Tony Erdmann because it's the front runner at the Oscars this year, or if they'll give it to one of the other 3. Because sometimes the BAFTAs agree with the Oscars on Best Foreign Language Film, and sometimes they don't. For Best Animated Feature, these 4 nominees I can't complain about at all. They all deserve to be on here. Although the weird thing about Best Animated Feature for the BAFTAs is typically they've only had 3 nominees, while the Oscars now go up to 5. I'm wondering if there was like a tie in the voting which allowed a fourth nominee to be chosen, or if they're going to stick with 4 from now on. In my opinion, they should just go up to 5, so that way they could nominate other animated films that have been getting a lot of great buzz, like The Red Turtle, for instance, or Your Name, or My Life as a Zucchini. And for Outstanding British Film, the only 2 that I've seen here are Denial and Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. I'll admit I'm a bit surprised by Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them being nominated here. It's not a bad film at all, but usually with a category like this, they like to go for more prestige art house films, not necessarily big fantasy blockbusters. But I guess they really loved it, and like I said before, it's a good film, but I don't think it's actually going to win. Now, the interesting thing about Outstanding British Film is that it doesn't necessarily have to be a film that's set in Britain or deals with British issues to be nominated here. The only requirement a film has to have to be nominated for Outstanding British Film is that the directing or producing team has to be British. That's it. For instance, Gravity, which had American stars in George Clooney and Sandra Bullock and a Mexican director in Alfonso Cuarón, that was nominated for and won Outstanding British Film because its producers were British. So that's why you have American Honey nominated here, because even though it's set in America and features a largely American cast, its director, Andrea Arnold, happens to be British, so therefore that's why it's nominated here. That could end up winning, I bet, because it's been getting a lot of praise, and although it didn't really do too well at the American box office, even by independent film standards, I know a lot of film critics really loved it, and many are calling it one of the more underrated and underseen films of 2016. However, I know some people who have seen it, and one person in particular told me it's extremely overrated and overhyped and not at all as good as other people say it is. Daniel Blake, I've heard a lot of big buzz about. It actually won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival last year, and its director Ken Loach is very well known in Britain. He's a British director who's been around for a very long time, I believe at least 50 years. But throughout his career, he's never ever made films in Hollywood, nor do I think he's ever made films with American actors. I think all his films have been made in Britain and feature largely British casts, and he's in his 80s now and still making films, still getting high critical acclaim. So I guess that combined with the Palme d'Or win for this film is one of the big reasons why it's nominated here. And this is one of those cases where the BAFTAs will probably diverge from the Oscars, because if there's a film that's very British in terms of its themes and plot, the BAFTAs will like to nominate it because they like to honor their own, which is fine, but that doesn't necessarily mean it will also get a lot of nominations at the Oscars, because I don't know how many Oscar voters have actually watched this movie. Certain films like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy did very, very well at the BAFTAs in terms of getting a lot of nominations, but it only got like 3 Oscar nominations in big categories, but nowhere near as many as it got at the BAFTAs. And Notes on Blindness I briefly talked about before, and then Under the Shadow, the last one, I've heard about it, and I've heard great things about it from British film critics like Mark Kermode, who've really praised the hell out of it, but it was actually the submission by the UK for Best Foreign Language Film for the Oscars. Unfortunately, it did not make the cut for the 9 semi-finalists. And then Outstanding Debut by a British writer, director, or producer. Not familiar with The Girl with All the Gifts or The Hard Stop or The Pass, but again they mentioned Notes on Blindness and Under the Shadow. For Best Original Screenplay, very glad for Hell or High Water, fantastic screenplay. Can't comment about I, Daniel Blake, but the critics have been raving about it, so I guess there you go. La La Land, absolutely. Manchester by the Sea, absolutely. Moonlight, absolutely, although if it gets an Oscar nomination, Moonlight will be competing in Adapted Screenplay, because it's technically based on a play, albeit an unpublished play, but according to the Oscars, that point right there makes it automatically an adapted screenplay instead of an original. Some films I wish could have been in here are Jackie and Eye in the Sky. I know Eye in the Sky had pretty much no chance of getting nominated for any screenplay awards because it's largely been forgotten. But if you watch that film, you'll see just how fantastic of a screenplay it has. Jackie had a fantastic screenplay, given the fact that it's told in a non-linear order, and when you do a film like that, if you don't have great writing, your film will fail, and Jackie thankfully does not fail. Zootopia, I thought, had a fantastic original screenplay, and award shows have nominated animated films for screenplays in the past, both original and adapted. Films like Toy Story 3, Inside Out, they've all gotten nominations for original or adapted screenplay, so it would have been nice to see Zootopia get that too, but we'll see what happens at the Oscars maybe. For Best Adapted Screenplay, Arrival definitely deserves to be on here. Hacksaw Ridge, I guess, but the screenplay was good, but not necessarily amazing. Hidden Figures, I still have to see. Lion, I can understand being in here. Nocturnal Animals, I know a lot of people did like that screenplay, and it's fine, but it didn't necessarily stand out to me as one of the best adapted screenplays of the year. I'm very shocked Fences is not in here, although it's pretty much a word-for-word, scene-by-scene adaptation of the original play by August Wilson. It nevertheless was a fantastic stage-to-screen interpretation, and the fact that the actors made the film as watchable as it was, even though they had to do these very long monologues, which could easily make some people bored if they were not done right. Just the fact that they were done right, I feel, is a good reason why Fences should have been nominated here in place of Nocturnal Animals. I'm honestly surprised Fences has underperformed as much as it has. Maybe not enough voters saw it. Well, enough voters saw it to give Viola Davis a nomination, so at least the actors branch of the BAFTAs saw it, but I'm surprised it didn't get nominated anywhere else. And screenplay or actor or director for Denzel Washington, since he did both of those things, or Best Picture. Rising Star Award looks like an interesting bunch. I've never heard of Leia Costa, but the other four I can totally understand why they're nominated here. For Best Supporting Actor, very happy with the first four. Mahershala Ali deserves to be in here. Jeff Bridges deserves to be in here. Hugh Grant deserves to be in here. Dev Patel deserves to be in here. Aaron Taylor Johnson. Really? Now, I know that the BAFTA voting ended before the Golden Globes were given out, and no one was expecting Aaron Taylor Johnson to win the Golden Globe, but he did. And then these nominations came out 2 days later. And while his performance was good, nothing about it was necessarily awards-worthy. If you watch my Golden Globes video, I talked at length about how I felt Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, who's this murderous psychopath, wasn't layered enough, in my opinion, to win. Because in the past, whenever you've had actors or actresses win awards for playing psychopaths like Louise Fletcher in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Kathy Bates in Misery, Javier Bardem in No Country for Old Men, or Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, or Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Bastards, there's often layers to their characters and their psychopathic behavior. They can often go from one demeanor to another in the snap of a finger, and Aaron Taylor Johnson just has one demeanor throughout the whole film. If he actually wins here, and he should get nominated at the Oscars, oh boy, I have no idea what will happen then. We could have another Christoph Waltz Django Unchained scenario. But hopefully Mahershala Ali will win, because I feel he is the deserving winner here. Well, he, Jeff Bridges, Hugh Grant, and Dev Patel all deserve to be nominated here, but I think Mahershala Ali is my personal favorite of this bunch. For Best Supporting Actress, Viola Davis deserves to be here, Naomi Harris deserves to be here, Nicole Kidman deserves to be here, Michelle Williams deserves to be here. Haven't seen Haley Squires and I, Daniel Blake, so I can't comment about that. But given that Hidden Figures got a Best Adapted Screenplay nomination, I'm surprised that Octavia Spencer couldn't get a nomination in Supporting Actress as well, since she did get nominated at the Golden Globes and the Screen Actors Guild Awards. But I guess I, Daniel Blake, was just more fresh in their minds, or more stuck in their minds, since they had probably seen it before seeing Hidden Figures. But overall, at least the other four, a good list. For Best Actor, uh, Casey Affleck, Andrew Garfield, Ryan Gosling, Viggo Mortensen, they're all great. Jake Gyllenhaal in Nocturnal Animals, he's very good in the movie, but I wouldn't say he's as good as Denzel Washington in Fences, or Joel Edgerton in Loving, or Tom Hanks in Sully. I feel those three men were a little bit more deserving of a nomination here. For Best Actress, Amy Adams absolutely deserves to be in here for Arrival. Natalie Portman absolutely deserves to be in here for Jackie. Emma Stone deserves to be in here for La La Land. Meryl Streep deserves to be in here for Florence Foster Jenkins. Some people might be thinking, ugh, Meryl Streep, really? Is she really that good? Yes, she is. And if you watch Florence Foster Jenkins, you'll see that this role is definitely different from some of her other roles she's played. And not just because her character is an extremely bad singer. Emily Blunt for The Girl on the Train. I'll admit I'm very surprised to see that here. I'm actually one of the few people who liked The Girl on the Train, and I did think Emily Blunt's performance was really good. However, I didn't think anything about The Girl on the Train was necessarily awards-worthy. I was very surprised when the Screen Actors Guild Awards nominated it, and I figured maybe people on the nominating committee just really loved that film. I honestly didn't think she'd be nominated anywhere else, but, I guess because she's a Brit and they love their Brits, she's nominated here too. So, and The Girl on the Train, even though the movie is set in America, the original novel is set in England, so maybe the nomination for that is to remind people of the fact that the book is set in England. Even though Emily Blunt is nominated here, there's no way she's probably going to win this. I still think this is probably going to be a big race between Natalie Portman for Jackie and Emma Stone for La La Land, since right now it's like a nail-biting race between those two. They're both expected to be nominated at the Oscars, and right now it's anyone's guess as to which one of the two might win, because right now their chances of winning are pretty much an equal 50%. Isabelle Huppert, unfortunately, was not eligible to be nominated here for Elle, for which she recently won the Golden Globe, and she's won several other Film Critics Circle awards, because Elle, even if it has screened for critics, it doesn't get a wide release in the UK until March, and the BAFTA rules state that any film that's going to be nominated at the BAFTAs has to open in British theaters by the weekend that the BAFTAs occur, because various films that compete at the BAFTAs often get a later theatrical release date in Britain than they do in America, usually with big blockbusters like superhero films or science fiction films or family-oriented films. They may often get the same release date in both the US and Great Britain, but a lot of time the film, after being released in America, won't get released in Britain until a few months later. Some actresses I personally would have liked to have seen be nominated in here are Ruth Negga for Loving or Anya Taylor-Joy for The Witch. Ruth Negga did get a Golden Globe and the Critics' Choice nomination, but she hasn't really shown up anywhere else, which is a shame because she is so amazing in Loving. And Anya Taylor-Joy, I feel so bad that The Witch didn't really get any kind of awards campaign, because it was one of those rare horror films that really had some elements worthy of recognition. Acting, writing, directing, art direction, costume design, cinematography, all of those things, in my opinion, were worthy of awards nominations, especially Anya Taylor-Joy for her performance, because she's only like 19 years old, I think, but in The Witch she gave a performance that was far beyond her years, far beyond what you would expect a 19-year-old actress to give. And it's the kind of performance that when you watch it, you're like, wow. It's the kind of performance that you'll remember for years to come after you watch it. For Best Director, very glad for Denis Villeneuve for Arrival. Absolutely deserves to be here. Ken Loach for I, Daniel Blake, again, talking about him being the veteran director and the fact that it won the top prize at the Cannes Film Festival. Damien Chazelle, of course, for La La Land, no surprise there. Kenneth Lonergan for Manchester by the Sea, no surprise there. Tom Ford again for Nocturnal Animals, like the Golden Globes, really? Now, his directing was okay in Nocturnal Animals, especially given the fact that this is only his second film, and Tom Ford, for most of his adult life, has been a fashion designer rather than a filmmaker, but was his directing really more worthy than Barry Jenkins for Moonlight or David Mackenzie for Hell or High Water, or Denzel Washington for Fences, or Garth Davis for Lion, or even though I haven't seen it yet, but I gotta mention him just because of how legendary of a director he is, Martin Scorsese for Silence. I just don't get it, I really don't, because Moonlight, Hell or High Water, and Fences in particular, their directing is what made those movies stand out the way they do. The choices that those directors made impacted everything else that happened in that movie, from the acting to the writing to the directing to the cinematography to the music. And the fact that that was not taken into consideration here really upsets me, because I don't know what it is about Nocturnal Animals that makes that film much more awards worthy in these people's eyes than the movies I just mentioned. I really don't. And I know some people from within my own film circle group on Facebook really love Nocturnal Animals and really are probably glad that it got this many nominations. And I know others who are like me and say it's good but not great, and I know others who absolutely hated this film and find it offensive and repugnant. So this is a very divisive film. This is not a film that by any means has universal praise. Films like Moonlight, Hell or High Water, Fences, those are films that have universal praise. In fact, go on Rotten Tomatoes and you'll see that those films' Rotten Tomatoes scores are much higher than Nocturnal Animals. Now for Best Picture, these all look very good for the most part, given the fact that the BAFTAs stick with only 5 nominees, which I feel it's time they stop doing that and should just go up to 10 like the Oscars do. Well, the Oscars technically have a rule where it's a minimum of 5, a maximum of 10. You can nominate anywhere between 5 to 10 films as long as they have a certain number of votes. So I think the BAFTA should at least put some kind of change like that. But from what they have nominated, it looks very good. Very glad for Arrival, La La Land, Manchester by the Sea, and Moonlight. I'm sure I, Daniel Blake, is probably very good, but again, I haven't seen it. I'm just glad at least Nocturnal Animals didn't make it in here, and it's interesting when you have a film get nominations in so many other categories, including directing, acting, writing, but not Best Picture. So it really goes to show that Nocturnal Animals may have had support from various people in their own branches, but not the whole BAFTA membership. Because like the Oscars, the BAFTAs, in terms of the nomination process, everyone can nominate Best Picture regardless of their branch, but then the only other category they can nominate is the category belonging to their branch. Actors nominate actors, directors nominate directors, etc. But then once the nominations come out, the whole BAFTA membership can vote for everything. So overall, I like most of these BAFTA nominations. I like Arrival, Hell or High Water, La La Land, Lion, Manchester by the Sea, Moonlight, Jackie, getting the nominations that they mostly deserve. Although I'm very disappointed that Nocturnal Animals, even though I like the film, got as many nominations as it did. Because while it was a good film, nothing about it, not the set, not the acting, not the writing, not the directing, not the editing, not the music, really stood out to make an impact. And I just hope that the Oscars don't give it as many nominations or none at all. I just hope they focus on the other films that I mentioned. I'm curious to see if they will embrace silence when so many other award show bodies have not. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know in the comment section below what you think of the BAFTA nominations. What nominations make you the happiest, which ones make you angry, and which snubs do you think are the most egregious? Because there's always some snubs that everybody's going to focus on and that everybody will feel should have been included. And please let me know what you think those are. And please subscribe to my channel so that you can get my newest videos as soon as they're uploaded. And stay tuned in the coming weeks and months for more award show related coverage. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.